suffering grows in silence. Pain grows, it replicates, it increases in size. And when we can shine the light on it, the light of being transparent, it has no place to continue to fester.
I believe monsters live in the dark.
Yes.
And when you turn the light on, it's like, oh, that doesn't have as much power over me as I thought it did. Kay Buck, Executive Director of the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, or CAST, C-A-S-T. She has over 16 years of experience in the violence against women field at the state, national, and international levels. As the executive, Kay leads the only organization in the entire country that is exclusively dedicated to working on the human rights issues of trafficking. I've done a number of episodes about this over the years, and I've learned three things that I hold to be true, and I want you to refine those and teach me some more about them.
Sure.
One is that trafficking is not what most people think. Most people think about it in terms of what you see in movies with people being put in containers and shipped around. That does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's not always nearly as exotic as that. Number two, I don't know what the ratio is, but it's typically, I've found, more slave labor than sexual in nature, although that's more sensational and salacious, but it's more getting these people working for nothing and holding them kind of captive to that. Then third, it's happening all around us. We go to restaurants, we go to hotels, we go to events, and we're rubbing elbows with these people that you don't have to be interacting with prostitutes or drug dealers or whatever to be encountering these people in our lives, that they're in our lives, in our everyday world, particularly in major cities.
Right, and also in rural areas.
Yes, certainly.
In the agricultural industry. Right.
Certainly if you're in farming areas and agricultural areas, we're less likely to interact with them there, but they're certainly represented there.
Sometimes there are children who are they're running away from home. They don't have a great home life, and recruiters or traffickers themselves can hone in on that and trick them into thinking that they love them or that they have a better opportunity for them. Foreign nationals, so people who are immigrants who are, again, tricked by foreign labor brokers in their hometown, in their country of origin, and they're tricked into thinking they have a great job here in the United States. Many times our clients don't even know that they are in Los Angeles. They just know that they're in the U.S. And, sometimes they are, going to the supermarket with the trafficker and their family, or taking care of the trafficker's children in the case of domestic servitude. Sometimes they're working in a restaurant and they have to sleep and live and work all in the same place. So it's a lot of different scenarios, but the number one common theme is that they are exploited commercially. So they are exploited for profit. And what that means is one human being is exploiting another in order to make a profit.
Jennifer Snyder, head deputy of the Norwalk branch of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, and George Mueller, deputy commissioner for the California Department of Insurance Enforcement Branch. We're not far from what is referred to as the Rehab Riviera. There's a part of LA where there are a lot of rehab facilities here for drug and alcohol. Some of them are 5-star, A+ quality organizations. Some of them are not. When people go into rehab, there are phases. There's rehab, the initial treatment. Then when they get through with rehab, there are other kind of halfway steps. There are halfway houses. There are sober living houses. Like most industries, these are given to abuse when you're dealing with a vulnerable population. And there has been a lot of fraud going on in this industry as well.
We work very closely with all our district attorney partners. And when you're talking about these sober living homes, I mean, Orange County is kind of the benchmark that they've set across the country is one of the highest areas that people have joked about, that there are more sober living homes in Orange County than there are Starbucks, which is kind of hard to believe. And what we really started to find is the brokering of patients. The fraud that is going on with these sober living homes right now is disgusting, Dr. Phil. You know, these places are buying insurance policies for people across the country. They're flying them out here to promise them, you know, this great rehab and to bring their life back. And they get them into these rehabs. And it starts off well. And next thing you know is just as the insurance policy is beginning to run out and they don't have the coverage anymore, what they do is they'll go ahead and they'll supply them narcotics again or whatever their addiction is to. And they'll then kick them out on the street and then try to restart that whole insurance policy again and bring them back into the fold. Or they'll send them to another facility, which, believe it or not, is probably one of their facilities as well. A lot of times they have these shell companies where they have multiple different types of names. And the minute law enforcement starts to pick up on them, guess what they do? They change their name, they move to a different location, and they're in our neighborhoods as well. You will hear neighbors complain all the time, well, there is a sober living house right next door to me with all these people. And a lot of the communities or these local cities don't have any ordinance to prevent that. But right now, sober living homes is one of the biggest scams going on across this country. In Florida is probably one of the biggest. And then you bring it out to California. You and I have talked in the past. Insurance fraud either starts in Florida or it starts in California. They learn it from the other side of the coast, and then it goes there as well.
There are some watchdog groups out there. Wendy McIntyre, who is founder of an organization, jaredslaw.org. I don't know if y'all have encountered Wendy, but she founded this organization in 2005 after the loss of her son, Jared, at a rogue sober living home. And she started this 501c. It's a nonprofit organization, and they really work as a protector looking into these bogus, illegal sober living facilities and really audits these things and does what you're saying, sends people inside and looks at them. And so you've just got to get on the internet, do your homework, make visits, call, find out what's going on. And if they're trafficking your family member around, that's a real big red flag.
They're unfortunately they are operating outside those regulations. And I think Orange County, it's like when you look at the advertisement and you see Orange County, you see the beach, you know, you see the beautiful sunsets. People see that. Well, if I'm going to go to rehab, I want to go to a place where I'm also going to be able to have those amenities and live that type of lifestyle. And Orange County just offers that, Dr. Phil. So unfortunately, it is they're not being regulated for that. You know, a little bit, and Jennifer talked about it as well. What happens a lot in these sober living too is they do kind of strip their identity as well. And if they're not being transparent, you have to do your research. And you touched on that. We have done investigations, and I've heard it from people that I've talked to in that industry, is that they will then take an individual, and predominantly in this case females, and they'll take them out. Let's go out on a boat ride today just to get you away from this place, to get you some fresh air. In this particular case, this person took this female out on this boat out in the Marina Del Rey here in California, and provides her drugs. And the next thing what happens, sexually assault and rape. And we hear that a lot in these bad sober living homes. There are a lot, as Jennifer said, there are a lot of great facilities out there that are really changing people's lives and getting them back on the straight and narrow so they can be successful and stay away from their addiction. But you have these bad people that are really taking advantage of these people in these sober living homes, and again, providing them drugs and taking abuse and abusing them sexually and by raping them. And so, unfortunately, we have seen that come across our table. And it does break our heart because, one, they are fighting this addiction. They're at the lowest point in their life, as Jennifer said. And now you've taken them to a whole nother place. And I've heard recently in one story where this female tried to commit suicide because of the trauma she had been put through.
One of the things that this points out is the human toll of these crimes is much greater than the dollar value. How do you put a person's life back together after they've gone to somebody for help and they got exploited? And that is why these things are crimes. It's not just about the dollars. We get really caught up in talking about, oh, it's this many millions or that many millions. And while that's a factor, it's a metric. The real challenge in these cases is the human toll. How do you restore those people? How do you restore faith in an industry that has been exploited by these bad actors? How do you hit that balance between being vigilant and being paranoid? And that's the danger.
My guest today was a bright-eyed and beautiful 18-year-old girl with high hopes of escaping her small hometown in Colorado to pursue a modeling career in France. But what started out as a dream soon turned into an unimaginable nightmare. The day she arrived, she was kidnapped, drugged, beaten, and raped over a 2-day period, and then dumped on a roadside, left for dead. She said she was so terrified and traumatized, she told no one about her ordeal for over a decade. So how did this broken young girl not only survive, but go on to thrive and become a best-selling author, speaker, and international life coach, helping hundreds of thousands of people the world over? Cheryl Hunter. Tell me what's your favorite thing to do in terms of impacting people. Do you like motivational speaking? Do you like life skills training? Are those the same things for you? How do you like to impact people the most?
One of the things I've been doing recently is working with small groups. And I have started doing it on video so people can participate wherever they are in the world in a way that works for them. But there's something about working in groups that are small enough that people can get personal interaction, but large enough so that we can see ourselves in another. Because most of the things that we each deal with we think it's a personal thing, but it's human phenomena. So there's something about that particular format that I'm finding is really effective.
You've had to overcome and have overcome some really difficult things in your life. A lot of people have. Yours are very dramatic. You've had to overcome those things and be tough to do it. And you did it on your own. You chose to kind of push this down, handle it on your own instead of talk about it. Do you consider that toughness? Do you consider it compartmentalizing? Do you consider it denial? What was the quality or the strategy that you used to handle that for 10 years without ever touching it?
Initially, I think it was a little of all of them. There was some grit to it, certainly. I mean, you don't grow up on a ranch without some grit. But I think, in retrospect, it was also a little bit of denial, a little bit of fantasy. Like if I just pretend it didn't happen, even to myself, and never admit it, then it's as though it didn't happen.
What would your advice be if you were in one of your groups or whatever, and you encountered you at 18 years old, someone that maybe it was on a college campus here in the States, maybe it was after work or whatever, somebody had been violated the way you were violated, and they confided in you, this happened to me a year ago, I haven't told anybody, I'm dealing with this internally on my own. Having gone down that road, what would be your advice to that person?
Do not isolate. Speak to people. I think my road of healing took so long because I isolated and kept it to myself. Get into therapy, get into a group of survivors, something. Get into something that allows you to find community and realize that the responses you're having are natural and normal and you're not alone. And it's interesting that you say that, because every time I speak, which really truly is one of my favorite things, do public speaking, every time I do that, people come up and confide in me that they not only have been sexually assaulted or violated in some way, but that they've never told a soul. Adults. There was a woman who was 77 who told me she had lived her life never telling anybody.
You're not alone. People think I'm the only one that feels this way, suffers this. No, you're not. Nobody has invented new suffering in the last 2,000 years. Nobody's invented new suffering. We share it with somebody, somewhere, somehow.
when I was trying to overcome the initial shock of being abducted by these men, I relied on the stories I heard from other people, like the Holocaust survivors. And it was so therapeutic to me that I made it my mission now to tell inspiring stories of other people. And so I shot this docuseries called Rise, of people who've done that, just have risen from the ashes. It's one of the things that is most inspiring about watching you, and my mom and grandma were both really big fans. It's the stories of hope that you bring. And I know that they're here with me today. Not talking like the person who thought I was crazy for thinking I'm talking to the dead, but I really do feel them here. And I want in some way to bring these stories of hope to the world as well. I think in these polarizing times, seeing somebody else's example of somebody who's been able to pull it together and overcome and feel like, oh, that's me. I'm just like them. I can do it. Even if our circumstances in life are dramatically different, I think we learn through example. We learn through modeling. We learn through story.
Wendy Murphy is an attorney that specializes in the representation of crime victims, particularly women and children. For more than 15 years, Wendy has served as an adjunct professor of sexual violence law at New England Law, Boston. She also co-directs the Women's and Children's Advocacy Project under the Center for Law and Social Responsibility. She's done so much. I could go on forever and not even get to her. I think words are very powerful. And you've spent a lot of time talking about and critiquing the vague language, such as molestation, sexual assault, which does whitewash very serious acts, which can involve penetration, etc. You've criticized the court, prosecutors, all for not being more aggressive in describing the gravity of these crimes, correct?
Yeah, I mean, what an important topic. And I'm so grateful you brought this up because language, as you know, is passively absorbed by all of us. When we read something or watch something, we just take it in very passively. We're not trained to be critical consumers of words and information. So we don't tend to think hard about the words that we use ourselves to describe things. And many years ago, I founded the first in the country, at my law school, I founded the first in the country program to, in a systematic way, critique the language used by courts and media in describing violence against women and children for, very simple reason that if what is written or said is either vague or erotic or just not clear about the nature of the harm the victim endures, then naturally our culture comes to understand that suffering as something inconsequential, not very serious, not worth worrying too much about. And in turn, we don't get nearly as upset as we should as a culture about the problem, even though it's destroying lives, leading to high rates of domestic violence, homicides, suicides after sexual assault, and so on. One of my pet peeves that is used all the time in media and by the courts around this country is the phrase, "the child performed oral sex." You read it all the time, and generally speaking, that is a description that is the antithesis of what actually happens when a child is raped in a way that happens to involve an oral penetration. The child isn't performing anything. The child is the recipient of severely abusive sexual violence. The child is not engaged in any kind of sex. So that whole phrase is so wrong. The child should not be described as the performer. The actor in that sentence should be the rapist. And so the correct way to describe what happened is the rapist penetrated the child's mouth. I mean, as blunt as that is, And as uncomfortable as it might make us feel, that's the truth. And we need to know the truth, we need to hear the truth, and we need to be uncomfortable in order to understand the severity of what a child goes through when that happens. And it's a very common form of child sex abuse.
But that's the point. They need to feel uncomfortable to appreciate what the child endured. You don't want the jury to feel comfortable. They need to feel uncomfortable. If they don't, they aren't grasping what took place at the time. It needs to be offensive to their sensibilities. They need to be uncomfortable hearing it. They need to be embarrassed to hear it. They need to feel shame that it occurred. They need to be outraged that it happened, not whitewashed with the language so they can sit over there and feel comfortable in the box. People ask me sometimes, Dr. Phil, you often say that rape is one of the most underreported crimes in the country, because I've said, 1 in 4 women are the victim of sexual violence. And at that, it's underreported. Why? These are the reasons why. What we've been talking about is the fact that they are subjected to these pre-offense audits of their life, and everything in the world is pulled out. Like you said, a woman had to out the fact that things had happened to her with her father before, where she had been raped by him. Then I've seen cases where they then take that and pull out research that says when that happens to a child, they often become promiscuous. And then because of the promiscuity, they wanted this. They use it to spin it against them psychologically. They go into their dating histories and put them on trial. All of these things are underreported, and that's why a lot of them don't come forward and bring charges against the person.
Yeah, and it's funny. Rape is very underreported, always has been. And that's partly because we do make it painful to seek justice. Justice should not be painful. We should be celebrating people who are reporting crimes, whether it's a drunk driver, a bank robber, or violence behind closed doors. It's all violence against society. It's all crime against society. And it's not a private problem just because it happens behind closed doors. I think we forget that sometimes. So we need to reward people who come forward, treat them as heroic. Because when people speak, when they talk about crimes that happen, no matter where they happen, it helps prevent crimes against others. That's one of the benefits of the criminal justice system. It deters other people from doing the same things. So if you keep pushing victims away of certain types of crimes, if you keep messaging them that it's going to be painful for them to participate in the legal system, you're basically telling others in society, don't bother.
I love the fact that you focus on the language that's used, because I am such a believer in the power of words, the power of language that we use. I mean, when I'm talking to somebody and they say, "Oh, I just had a horrible day. It was just horrible." And I think, really? Go to a children's burn unit. That's horrible. You being 15 minutes late for lunch and having to go back and get something you forgot, that's inconvenient. That's not horrible. But when you tell yourself you had a horrible day, when in fact it was inconvenient, when you say someone was molested and you don't tell the jury what really happened, tissues were torn, blood was had, a child was violently assaulted. Language is powerful. Use words to say what really happened. Don't catastrophize when it wasn't, and don't trivialize when it was. That's so powerful. And the fact that you're doing this sociolinguistic research and educating the court system about it, that may be one of the most powerful things that you ever do. That may be your most powerful legacy in all of this. I'm a strong believer in that. So God bless you for doing it.
Thank you for saying that. It's a very important project to me, and my students really love it. Every year they get excited about knowing that as lawyers, they don't have to just argue the law. Sometimes they can make change by stepping into other disciplines and helping reform systems in ways that no law school professor is ever going to teach them.